Two separate bills would pave the way for sports betting in Tennessee. Democrat Knoxville Representative Rick Staples filed the latest proposal this week. It would create a sports betting commission. The commission would tax 10% on bets, and money raised would go to the General Education Fund. It follows another bill from Representative Staples filed late last year. That bill would allow sports betting if approved by local cities. Now, both bills are in the early stages. They have been introduced, but they must still go through both the House and Senate, as well as committees there, before even heading to the governor's desk. Now, if you want to keep track of those bills and others, stay on top of legislation moving through the state legislature at WBIR.com. Just head to the politics page and click on our producer Annie's bill block.
It was a long day of waiting for Vol fans on National Signing Day, but it paid